Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. New York City, a sweltering summer afternoon. The downtown streets were bustling with people, horns honked, and the windows glittered in the sunlight. Madison Reynolds, a 24-year-old black woman, walked confidently toward Elegance & Company, one of the mall's most luxurious stores. She was wearing an elegant beige dress and carrying a leather bag, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. She wanted to find the perfect gift for her mother's birthday. As she walked through the door, she felt a heavy gaze. Derek Thompson, the 38-year-old security guard, stood there with his arms crossed, his gaze cold and suspicious. "Hey, you," he shouted, startling Madison. "You're going to tell me what you're doing here?" Madison looked at him, surprised but calm. I'm a customer, I just want to look at your products," she replied softly. Derek snorted. "I'm not being kidded. You look suspicious." Without warning, he pushed her against the counter, searched her bag in front of the stunned customers, and publicly humiliated her. Murmurs erupted around them. Madison, controlling her anger, stood straight and replied simply, "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're wrong." The minutes dragged on. Derek continued to accuse her, humiliating her dignity and patience. Madison knew she mustn't lose her composure. The scene lasted a few minutes before she left the store, head held high, despite the humiliation she felt. What he didn't know was that Madison Reynolds wasn't just a client. She was the only daughter of Marcus Reynolds, the mall owner and influential businessman. And one day soon, Derek would discover that his actions came at a price. The next morning, Madison woke with the bitter memory of the incident. Every move, every word Derek made still echoed in her head. She had tried to remain calm, but the shame imposed by that arrogant, racist security guard still burned. The mall was already buzzing with excitement. Employees were whispering among themselves about what had happened the day before. Several customers had taken photos or videos, some of which were already circulating on social media. Madison, aware of her dignity, knew she had to act with caution and intelligence. She decided not to create a scene, but to go to management to report the incident. She entered the administrative office, where she was greeted by a few nervous assistants. "I'm Madison Reynolds," she began calmly. "I wish to report an incident that occurred at your store yesterday." The assistants exchanged awkward glances. One of them whispered, "You're Marcus Reynolds's daughter?" Madison simply nodded. Her presence already commanded respect. She recounted the events, detailing how Derek had humiliated her, searched her, and accused her without reason. Every word was precise, every gesture recalled with clarity. Meanwhile, Derek, in his office, didn't yet know that the case was about to catch up with him. His arrogance of yesterday was already turning into nascent anxiety. Outside, several customers who had witnessed the previous day's scene were whispering to each other in shock. Some had even filmed the scene, and these videos quickly circulated on social media. The mall's reputation was at stake. Madison, despite her inner anger, maintained a calm and dignified posture. She knew that true power lay not in immediate revenge, but in justice and truth. And one day soon, Derek would understand that his behavior had consequences he had never imagined. The next day, Marcus Reynolds, an influential businessman and owner of the mall, decided to conduct a surprise inspection of his luxury boutique. He had heard rumors from the central office about an incident involving a customer, but no one dared to give him all the details. As Marcus entered the store, he immediately noticed the tense atmosphere. The employees avoided his gaze, and Derek, the security guard, stood straight, visibly nervous. "What's going on here?" Marcus asked, his voice firm but calm. Derek, trying to sound confident, replied, "Nothing, Mr. Reynolds. Everything is under control." Marcus frowned and watched the scene. His eyes met Madison's, who had just entered with her dignity intact despite the previous day's humiliation. "Madison," he said softly, but with authority. "What happened here yesterday?" Madison calmly and precisely explained the situation, how Derek had falsely accused her, searched her in front of everyone, and humiliated her for no reason. She detailed the gestures, the words, and the customers' reactions. Marcus listened intently, every detail reinforcing his silent anger. Derek, meanwhile, felt his arrogance melt away at the gravity of the situation. He didn't know who he was dealing with. "Derek Thompson," Marcus said, turning to him, "you have disrespected my daughter and the customers of this mall. Your behavior is unacceptable." Derek tried to justify himself, stammering out weak, confused excuses, but Marcus remained impassive. "There is no excuse that can undo the humiliation you have caused. You are immediately suspended, and an investigation will be conducted." The employees and customers present watched in amazement. For the first time, Derek felt his pretense of authority disappear. The girl he had humiliated wasn't just a customer, she was the owner's daughter, and her position was unassailable. Madison, however, remained calm. Her gaze spoke volumes. Dignity is never lost, even in the face of hatred and injustice. Derek, however, began to understand that his actions would come at a price. A few hours after the surprise inspection, Marcus Reynolds summoned Derek Thompson to his office. The security guard, still reeling from the discovery that the humiliated customer was the owner's daughter, entered with a forced posture of confidence. But Marcus could sense his unease and nervousness. "Sit down, Derek," Marcus said calmly, his hands folded on the desk. Derek obeyed, trying to sound confident, but his hands were shaking slightly. "You know why you're here," Marcus began, his voice firm. "Yesterday, you humiliated a customer in front of everyone. A customer who, for your information, is my daughter." Derek swallowed, stammering. Mr. Reynolds. I thought she." Marcus raised his hand to interrupt her awkward apology. "You thought, what? That you could humiliate someone without consequences? That your position as a security guard gave you that right?" Derek remained silent. He knew nothing he said could erase what he had done. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "Derek, your behavior is unacceptable. You have abused your authority and disrespected a worthy and respected person. I will never tolerate this in my establishments. You are immediately dismissed." The words sounded like a clap of thunder. Derek, stunned, couldn't reply. The pride he thought he had vanished. For the first time, he felt ashamed of his actions. Marcus continues. "And let me be clear. This isn't just about losing your job. What you did has legal and media consequences. Your behavior will never be forgotten." Derek lowered his head, unable to meet the powerful businessman's gaze. He understood that his arrogance of yesterday had turned into a personal disaster. Meanwhile, Madison, present in the office but silent, watched the scene. Her calm and dignity were immutable. She knew that justice did not require violence or anger to triumph. She had just seen her father, Marcus Reynolds, exercise true power, that of responsibility and justice. Derek left the office a few minutes later, ashamed and humiliated, while Madison and Marcus exchanged a knowing look. The lesson had been taught: no one is above human dignity. Derek Thompson's dismissal quickly spread throughout the mall. Employees, relieved but still shocked by the incident, began sharing their stories with their contacts and on social media. Several customers who had witnessed Madison's humiliation posted videos and outraged messages. Within hours, the story had gone viral. Comments poured in: outrage, support for Madison, and condemnation of the security guard's racist behavior. Some local media outlets even picked up the story, highlighting Derek's arrogance and abuse of power. Derek, now home, stared anxiously at his phone. Each notification seemed further proof that his reputation was destroyed. Calls from recruiters or other companies weren't coming through, his name was associated with public humiliation and racism. For the first time, he felt the true weight of his actions. Meanwhile, Madison continued her life as usual, but with a renewed sense of confidence. She received many messages of support from clients, friends, and even strangers touched by her dignity and self-control. Marcus, proud of his daughter, reminded her that she had demonstrated something far more important than revenge: resilience. Inside the store, employees were telling everyone who would listen how Derek had been confronted by Marcus and Madison, and how he had left the store feeling humiliated. The mall's reputation was even enhanced by Marcus's quick and fair response, which showed he protected his customers and his family with integrity. Derek, alone at home, finally realized that his arrogance came at a high price: shame, job loss, and isolation. He was beginning to realize that the humiliation he had inflicted on Madison wasn't being directed against her, but against himself. The social and professional repercussions would now follow him everywhere. And Madison, without lifting a finger in revenge, continued to walk proudly, aware that true power resided in the dignity and respect one imposed on oneself. A few days after the incident and Derek's dismissal, Madison Reynolds decided to turn this painful experience into a lesson for him and for anyone who believed they could humiliate without consequence. She organized a charity event at the mall, inviting employees, loyal customers, and, discreetly, Derek Thompson. The room was meticulously decorated, with soft lighting and posters highlighting the mall's commitment to equality and human dignity. Guests were arriving, curious to see what the Reynolds family had prepared. Derek, unaware he was about to be confronted, entered and was immediately struck by the elegance of the event and the attentive crowd. Madison stepped up to the microphone, calm and radiant. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "I want to share an experience I recently had. An experience that taught me how to maintain dignity in the face of injustice and humiliation." All eyes turned to her. Derek felt a lump in his throat. Madison continued. "Yesterday I was wrongly accused, humiliated, and suspected without reason. But I am here before you not to seek revenge, but to show that dignity and respect never depend on someone else's position or authority." She paused, her gaze falling on Derek. "You, Derek Thompson, thought your role as a vigilante gave you the right to humiliate me. But what you did only gave me the opportunity to demonstrate my strength and courage." The entire room was silent, hanging on his every word. Derek felt shame wash over him, unable to reply. The girl he had humiliated wasn't just calm and dignified, she was powerful, influential, and respected by all. Marcus Reynolds spoke next. "Madison reminded us of a vital lesson: no one is above human dignity. Derek, your behavior was not only unacceptable, it was shameful." Derek stood frozen, aware that all the guests now had a clear picture of what he had done. The humiliation had been reversed, he was the culprit, standing under everyone's judgmental gaze. Madison concludes, "True strength lies not in humiliating others, but in respecting and maintaining integrity for oneself." Thank you all for supporting these values. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Derek left the event, his arrogance gone, marked by the lesson he would never forget. Madison, meanwhile, radiated confidence and serenity, having transformed injustice into power and an example for all. After the charity event, Derek Thompson sank into a forced introspection. For the first time, he understood that his arrogance and racist behavior had real and lasting consequences. Every interaction from the night before, every glance from the guests, and Madison's imposing calm replayed in his mind like a constant reminder of his shame. He tried to reconnect with colleagues and superiors to justify his actions, but everywhere he encountered closed doors. Social media and local media had amplified the incident. His name was now associated with humiliation and racism, and no apology could erase that image. Meanwhile, Madison continued her work at the mall and her personal projects. She received messages and calls of support, but remained humble. She knew that true victory lay not in revenge, but in dignity and self-respect. Marcus Reynolds, proud of his daughter, reminded her of the importance of turning adversity into a lesson for all. "You've shown that true power lies in self-control, Madison. Derek learned his lesson, but it was you who elevated your legacy of dignity." Derek, meanwhile, slowly began to experience a real inner shift. He understood that his actions had not only hurt Madison, but had exposed his own weakness and lack of values. The lesson in humility was painful but necessary. He had to face reality and learn to behave with respect, or remain marked by his own shame for the rest of his life. This reverse humiliation became a turning point for him. Derek understood that arrogance and false power were nothing compared to dignity and integrity. And while Madison continued to walk with confidence, he found himself alone with the weight of his mistakes, realizing that some lessons are never forgotten. In the following weeks, Madison Reynolds's life returned to normal, but with increased confidence and poise. The Derek Thompson incident and the charity event had attracted widespread media and customer attention, making her a symbol of dignity and resilience. Employees and customers now regarded her with deep respect, admiring her self-control in the face of injustice. Derek, meanwhile, tried to rebuild his life. After losing his job, he looked for other positions in private security, but his name was already circulating on social media as that of a racist and humiliating security guard. Every interview ended in rejection, and every attempt at justification seemed to reinforce the reputation he wanted to erase. At home, Derek reflected on his mistakes, reliving the scene from the charity event over and over again. The girl he had humiliated was respected not only by her father, but by the entire community. Madison had transformed her own humiliation into strength, and he was doomed to live with hers. At the mall, Marcus Reynolds and Madison discussed how to turn this incident into an example for all employees. Marcus suggested implementing training on respect, equality, and human dignity. Madison enthusiastically agreed, seeing this as an opportunity to positively change the work environment. The transformation wasn't just for Derek, but for everyone, a lesson in respect and awareness that even those at the top or in positions of authority must learn. Derek, isolated and scarred, was beginning to understand that his arrogance would get him nowhere. Meanwhile, Madison walked through the mall, greeting employees and customers with a calm smile. She now embodied the power of dignity, showing that true influence came not from imposed authority, but from inner strength and self-control. Derek, for his part, was confronting his own weakness, realizing that some mistakes never go away and that true power always lies in respect and integrity. Madison Reynolds's story didn't stay confined to the mall. Videos and testimonies of the incident and the charity event quickly spread across social media and local media. Soon, newspapers and television stations began covering her story as an example of dignity and courage in the face of racism and humiliation. Madison was invited to give interviews, always with the same calm and humility. She explained how she had transformed adversity into strength, and how self-control and dignity could have more impact than anger or revenge. Young people, especially in her community, began to see her as a role model. Her story was shared in educational forums and mentoring programs, inspiring those who faced similar discrimination or humiliation. Derek, for his part, followed these developments with anxiety and resignation. Every mention of Madison in the media was a reminder that her behavior had lasting consequences. He understood that the impact of his actions extended far beyond the store and his job. He had left a negative mark on the company and lost all professional credibility. At the mall, Marcus Reynolds decided to create a permanent initiative on respect and inclusion. He appointed Madison to lead this program, emphasizing the value of her experiences and her ability to inspire others. Madison accepted this responsibility with pride and determination, knowing that her courage could change the lives of many people. Thus, Madison's legacy of courage was established. Not only had she faced and overcome humiliation, but she had also transformed this experience into a message of strength, dignity, and respect for the entire community. Derek, meanwhile, was reduced to a living example of the consequences of racism and arrogance, while Madison became a symbol of integrity and moral power. Madison Reynolds knew that true power lay not in confrontation or outright revenge, but in self-control and dignity. Along with her father, Marcus Reynolds, she decided to use the incident to send a subtle but powerful message to Derek Thompson and anyone who might think humiliating someone without consequence. They implemented an internal campaign within the mall, respect training, diversity and inclusion awareness workshops, and a strict code of conduct for all employees. Every day, employees saw Madison walk with confidence, interact with customers with a calm and professional smile, and remind them through her actions what true respect meant. Derek, for his part, was still trying to rebuild his life, but he knew he would remain scarred by this humiliation. He heard about Madison's initiatives and her growing influence, and every success she achieved reminded him that he had lost his authority and control the moment he thought he could put her down. The subtlety of the revenge lay in the example Madison set. She wasn't trying to humiliate Derek further, but every gesture, every success, every dignified action silently confronted him with his own moral failure. She had turned the humiliation she had suffered into a public lesson in the power of respect and integrity. The mall's customers and employees emulated her. Her behavior inspired respect, loyalty, and admiration. Derek, on the other hand, remained a spectator to this transformation, unable to undo his mistakes, and aware that true revenge never came from anger, but from moral superiority and the positive influence one exerts around oneself. Thus, Madison had taught a silent but resounding lesson: true power lies in dignity, patience, and integrity, and those who seek to humiliate others always end up confronting the quiet strength of those they have underestimated. A few weeks later, the mall was feeling renewed. The respect and inclusion training Madison and Marcus had implemented had transformed the atmosphere. Employees were attentive and courteous, customers were greeted warmly, and Madison's story served as a reference point for everyone. Madison walked through the main lobby, serene, head held high, greeting employees and returning the smiles of customers. Her presence exuded a quiet power, that of someone who had overcome injustice, maintained her dignity, and transformed humiliation into strength and positive influence. Derek Thompson, invited to a personal awareness session by Marcus, made one last appearance in the mall. When he passed Madison, he instinctively looked down. He understood, without any words being necessary, that true power lay not in intimidation or humiliation, but in the dignity and respect that Madison embodied. Madison, however, didn't look at him. There was no need for confrontation, no need for revenge. The victory was silent but resounding. Respect and integrity had placed her on top, while arrogance and racism had reduced him to a shadow of his own shame. Marcus looked at his daughter, proud and moved. "You've shown everyone, Madison, that strength isn't found in anger, but in dignity and courage." And as Madison continued her walk through the mall, each step seemed to repeat a message: true power lies in respecting oneself and others, and those who seek to humiliate or demean will always end up confronting the quiet strength of those they have underestimated. Thus ended the story of Madison Reynolds, a lesson in dignity, courage, and quiet justice, where yesterday's humiliation had turned into today's resounding triumph.